My show and tell today has got to be about all the things that attract the insects that I also use in my arrangements. Got so many of these little darlings, attracting little insects, just doing their thing, and they just make me very, very happy. This red campion, they're like little cups, and the cups have got little curled edges full of little seeds, and you just think, isn't nature clever? It's just filled this little cup with seeds, and as the wind comes along, they just sort of shake out gently, and you end up with billions of plants.
Hello and welcome to episode 55 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking positively gleeful this morning, it's Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
And over in Cambridgeshire, in the other direction, we have Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson, looking absolutely admirable in apricot.
I have had this top described as like the thing you buy oranges in, like a tangerine net, which is kind of accurate, really. It's one of those sort of crochet holy tops.
Well, I tell you what, it's the best bit of upcycling I've seen today.
I think you need quite a lot of tangerine nets to fit me in. Looking very smart, and also being a real soldier this morning because he's just put his back out. We're joined. He's well drugged up. We're joined by Conrad McCormick, who is, well, first and foremost, at that Botanic guy on Instagram, who I follow avidly for all kinds of exploits from your garden. Also garden designer, journalist, environmentalist. Really nothing that you don't do, Conrad. But what's your middle name?
My full title is Conrad Patrick Matthew McCormick. There has to be a Patrick in there because I'm from Ireland, so.
Conrad, you joined the ranks of people with three first names. That's all of us. Well done.
Yeah, and some really great Irish names in there as well.
Yeah. I can't compete with your name, but like that's fantastic. Your full name is fantastic.
The best thing about me is most people still, when they see it written down, think I'm going to be some hulking Swedish man, which can be very disappointing when they meet me. But I do like a little bit of ambiguity. Now, I mentioned your Instagram page. It is just full of boisterous foliage, and you really love exotic plants, I suppose, first and foremost. But I get the impression from you love all things gardening and horticulture related. When did it all start for you?
Oh, so many years ago. I've been gardening since childhood. My parents, when they bought an old farmhouse, an old Georgian farmhouse, and they did it up. We moved there when I was about 4, and then as these things go, they didn't actually start the garden for a few years. So it must have been when I was about 8 or 9, they finally began to start the garden and get it in some sort of shape. And my first plants I ever bought were a couple of heathers and a bag of daffodils. Now the daffodils there's still a couple of them in the garden, sort of pop up every spring, but sort of from then on, I kind of haven't really looked back. Just gradually over the years and through my teenage years, I took over the garden then and added more and more plants to it. And then when I got to sort of my mid-teens, I discovered, well, I was going to say online shopping, but back then it was the mid-90s. There was no online shopping at that time. So it was mail order. Yeah, you had to send away for catalogues from the back of the garden magazines and then send off a postal order with the money on it. And the first exotic plant I bought was a palm tree. So yeah, the Trachycarpus fortunei, which is most people's introduction to kind of exotic gardening. And it's from that, then it just kind of snowballed and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I really love exotic plants, but I really love sort of normal, ordinary plants as well. So I try to mix them all together in the garden, and I hope that kind of works.
You must have been the most impoverished teenager in your friendship group.
Well, nobody knew about it. Of course, I had to keep this. This was like my deep, dark secret. Nobody at school knew that I had a greenhouse at home and that I was gardening and being a complete plant nerd. And even like when I started going out with my girlfriend in my late teens, like it was maybe about a year before I actually introduced her to my greenhouse as well. So it was, like, as I say, a deep, dark secret because it wasn't particularly cool. I'm still not cool, but gardening itself has kind of over the last few years, as you know, with the whole explosion of Instagram and all that, has really taken off, and we're kind of considered a bit more cool now by some people anyway. But yeah, all my pocket money was spent on mail order plants. Yeah.
And when you were getting into gardening, because obviously you started gardening with your grandparents when you were really small, was there ever a point where you fessed up to your mates? What was the cool factor around horticulture when you were young?
Me?
Yeah.
There wasn't one. There really wasn't one. I mean, no, it's just so uncool. And you were a nerd, you were just, if you weren't interested in football and all those kind of things, I mean, it didn't count. But I do remember, I mean, listen to Conrad just then, the backs of gardening magazines where you saw advertisements, that was the sole source of anything new and different. And when you're young and you want to grow something new and different, I mean, that's where you look. And to buy, or not to buy, but to actually send away for these catalogues. I mean, sometimes these nurseries, they were mean enough to charge you something for them. Lots of them were free. But you could, I mean, that added to my plant knowledge probably more than I give credit for, because I was introduced to these plants and somehow reading the descriptions of them, what they did, how they grew, where to grow them, all those kind of things. I mean, it was a revelation. Most of these sort of plants that you were finding out when you're young, when you're finding new plants, they're not listed very much in gardening encyclopedias and those sort of things because they're not fashionable enough. They're not readily available or fashionable enough. But it was really great fun doing your detective work and finding new stuff. And I'm still like that today. I mean, I still try new things. There's a particular plant. I think it's called. Is it called the Persian shield, Strobilanthes, something or other? Do you know it, Conrad?
Yeah, with the purple sort of shiny leaves, and then it catches the light. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. Well, that is notoriously difficult to grow or to get through the winter. I don't know whether you've tried it or not.
Tried it a lot, but
you see, most people have, but I have found the secret of success with it, and it's total winter neglect.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm good at that. I'm ready.
So I shove it in a corner of the greenhouse and I do nothing with it. And it kind of gets grown over and I think, oh, it's dead, it's gone, where is it? We muck the greenhouse out and there it is. And I just repotted it this last week because I knew some friends were coming to the garden and they always talk about Persian shield. And so I just left it in the middle of the greenhouse on a table so they'd be sure to see it. And it was really quite fun, because they said, see, your Persian shield's looking wonderful.
Brilliant.
So try again.
What's your climate like where you live, Conrad? If you're big into your exotics, are you battling some hard winters or are you all right?
No, because I'm up on the north coast of Northern Ireland, so I'm on the Antrim coast and I get the benefit of the Gulf Stream coming up around. A normal winter would be like -3, maybe -4. Like there was that winter 10 years ago, was it 2010, 11 or something, where, it was really, really bad and it got down to -9, I think. But that would be kind of, that would be exceptional. Like we all lost loads of plants and tree ferns and the likes then, but normal winter is generally quite wild, or mild, sorry. Wild as well, because it's quite windy up here. The garden we have now, it's open to the east, so there tends to be a breeze blowing every day and the easterly winds come through and can be quite cold. But apart from that, yes, generally it's a nice climate to grow in. We don't get the extreme heat that you would get over, in the south and the east of England. A hot day here is about 24 degrees. This summer we get up to about 26, I think. And that's a really, really, really hot day. It's just that kind of really soft, mild Irish climate. The rain, of course, is the thing. So there's a lot of plants that I grow, like from New Zealand and all, that don't mind it. But then I'm also into succulents and exotics. And then the mixture of the cold and the wet over the winter can be the death knell to a lot of exotics. So it's fine, or a lot of the sort of plants from drier climates that like to be dry over winter. So it's kind of finding the ones that are able to take that cold and also the mixture of wet at the same time. But generally, it's a nice climate for a lot of plants.
It's quite interesting to hear that you lost tree ferns in that winter, because we didn't. And here on the east coast of northeast Norfolk, the temperature is the annual frost days are the same as Devon, Cornwall, the west coast of Scotland. But I don't think that. I think when we do get frost, we get quite a lot of frost, if you see what I mean. But when we had that hard winter, inland here, inland in Norfolk, it was -10. Our lowest temperature was -2. Wow. Now enough to knock out the bananas, which it did.
Yeah.
Because of ours due. But tree ferns were all absolutely fine, and it was, I think, 2 years before that we decided not to wrap anything in the garden again because plants had just got too big, and we're getting older. Although you didn't hear me say that.
Well, I never wrap my tree ferns, because in a normal winter they don't need it at all. But that winter it was exceptional. Like the winter before there was actually 2 bad winters in a row. The winter before it got down to -7, -8 here, which again is quite unusual, and they were fine with that. But just the -9 was just too much that year.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, it's quite funny when we were planning this podcast, I did say, well, if you want to go for a walk about your garden, if your Wi-Fi will stretch, that'd be lovely. And you pointed out that wasn't very feasible because you are currently slightly building site-like. You are in the middle of some quite big garden projects.
Yeah, so we've been in this house for 4 years now, 4.5 years, and we just had like a typical concrete patio, concrete slab patio. So this year we've finally taken the plunge to invest in a nice terrace out the back. So we did a lot of preparatory work, a lot of hand digging. I don't know how many tons of topsoil we've dug out, and then how many tons of ballast and all that we've wheelbarrowed back in. The whole family were involved in it at times, some more keen than others. There's been a lot of work going on after the last couple of weeks because I'm not actually laying the patio itself. We've got somebody in to do that, but we were going to do all the preparatory work, and we were away on holidays there. Or just about 3 weeks ago, we were down in Cornwall, and then I got a text to say that they were coming then the following week. So then it was when we got home, it was a mad rush then to get everything prepared. But at the minute, there's just a mountain of topsoil in the middle of the lawn, and all the plants and tables and everything that would normally be in the patio are all on the lawn. So it looks like a complete disaster zone. But I'm hoping within the next week, everything will be back to normal again.
And have you got exciting visualizations, particularly with your kind of garden designer background, for how you're going to then enjoy this patio when it comes to displaying your plants?
Yeah, well, I've got loads of plants in pots, a lot of succulents and things that I haul in under cover over winter, so they'll all have to go out again. And then I've been adding to that, and then Danielle, my wife, she's saying, "Oh, don't be adding too many pots. Don't be taking up the whole patio with plants. I don't want it too cluttered." So it'll be finding that balance, and then over time we'll sort of slowly slip a few extra ones in. She always notices, but I kind of get away with it. And then I've got a big massive stock tank as well. I've got some of our big massive water tanks. I've got 4 of those, and I've filled 2 of them with succulents. And I have a couple more to do out the side of the house. So that's the next project as well. The side of the house that used to be a driveway, I'm going to lift the concrete there and then extend the garden up. Because when you have a small garden, it's not overly big, it's sort of like a typical suburban sized garden. We're on the edge of a village. But every square foot of ground is really important. So I've been eyeing that up for the past couple, since we moved in. So hopefully this autumn I'm going to make a start on it.
So exciting. So, seeing as we can't do a walk and talk around your garden, what have you brought for show and tell?
Well, my garden, as you said, is full of exotic plants. A lot of them are hardy, so I go for plants that will give, a really good foliage, and they're hardy in my conditions. So they're big leaves or interesting leaves, and then I sort of have spots of colour. So I kind of think of it as kind of like that jungle garden, like a Henry Rousseau painting, where you have loads of foliage, and then you have sort of splashes of really intense colour, and then it changes, over the summer with the likes of lilies and things that I have in pots, and I put them through the garden, and then when they're done, then I move them back out. So my favourite is, I love flowers, but I always seem to gravitate towards foliage, and I really love the Ariliaceae family, so the likes of just basically the ivy family, but the more exotic cousins of ivy. I really love Scheffleras, and they seem to do well despite the fact that it's quite windy. I grow quite a few of them in the garden. There's Schefflera, just again a leaf taiwaniana, which is fantastic. So you've got your umbrella plant, which you grow as a house plant indoors. It's in countless, doctors' waiting rooms and dentist waiting rooms up and down the country. It's not very fashionable, but Schefflera taiwaniana was introduced a few years. I think, I'm not sure if it was Creek Farm, one of the first ones to introduce it.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So, and mine came from Creek Farm. They attended a plant fair over in Dublin. So I drove all the way to Dublin specifically to pick up a Schefflera from them, and it came through that really hard winter. In my previous garden, we had a big, massive sycamore tree, Pseudoconax, and it was quite shady and dry, and I planted this right under the canopy of that, so it did really well in dry shade. Never had any extra watering, and then when we moved here, I dug it up and shifted it, and it's grown in almost pure clay as well in this garden, and it's, you know, it's romping away, doing really well. Has never flowered yet, but I'm hopeful in the next year or two it'll flower. And then I have another one. So they're similar leaves, of course, but this is Schefflera taiwaniana, which is that size. And then this one used to be called Schefflera impressa. It's now, I think it's rhododendrifolia. So again, it's quite large leaves, and it's one of the hardier ones too. So I would say -8, -9 shouldn't be any bother to it. And again, it's taken quite a bit of wind. And then a few years ago, we were in Cornwall, and I saw a Schefflera in Hardy Exotics nursery out near Penzance, and it was labelled as AFF taiwaniana or something like that. So they obviously thought it looked like a taiwaniana, but the leaves were just a wee bit broader. And as it's matured, now this isn't the biggest leaf, but they've just got really, really big. And it normally produces 2 flushes of leaves in the year. So this one is a spring set of leaves. So that's taiwaniana there. And then this one is triple the size. And then it'll normally produce flush in about August or September. And the leaflets are even bigger than this. So they could be another, 4 inches longer and another good inch wider. But I've put it out online to try and work out, in various groups, try and work out, the species name of it, but nobody has been able to come up with a name for it. But as I say, there are larger leaves than that again, but it's getting quite high, so I wasn't able to actually reach up and get them.
I bet all the people who've been trying to work out what it is are just really jealous, because that's some beautiful kind of boisterous foliage. And I can imagine in the breeze as well. You said your garden's quite breezy. You get so much movement.
You do, yeah. It actually looks like there's a really large-leaved Schefflera houseplant, and I cannot remember the species name of it, but somebody actually thought that it was that. Now, it's not, obviously, because that one's completely tender, but that grows in a tropical climate, but it's really fantastic-looking plant. And, the fact that you can grow these outside in Ireland and in the UK is amazing. Now, maybe not if you're in a real frost pocket, in the middle of County Carlow in Ireland, or if you're in a really cold area in England or in the Highlands of Scotland, maybe not. But, as I say, -5, -6 is no issue to it. And then another member of the Aureliaceae family, Pseudopanax, I grow quite a few of these in the garden. I have some really large-leaved ones like laetus, which is now Neopanax laetus. It used to be Pseudopanax laetus, but there's been a few hybrids of these have appeared over the last few years as well, some with broader leaflets. So normally you have Pseudopanax crassifolius, which has sort of a single long leaf. And the leaf could be 12 inches long at least. And some people don't like them at all because they think they look like dead sticks, with the really, the really long leaf, and then they're kind of brown as well. It's said that they developed that look, basically. They're from New Zealand, and it was so that they wouldn't be grazed on by the likes of the giant mole bird, so that they basically looked dead when they were until a certain height with the brown leaves, and they were ignored. And then when they get to about, maybe 12, 15 foot high and about 15, 20 years old, then they mature into a different, a more normal looking tree. It's still an exotic tree, but there have been a few of these have appeared in recent years. This one is Pseudopanax Chainsaw, and it has a trifoliate leaf. So rather than the normal single leaf, which, just one stem or a couple of stems and then these leaves hanging down, you're getting 3 times the amount of foliage on it. So I think it just is a much more, I don't know how well you can see that, but
yeah,
more foliar impact. Yeah, really nice. So I've dotted them through the garden because they're quite light in canopy, and then they don't really shade out plants underneath. So you can have them as exclamation marks planted, and among other things, lower growing plants and perennials, and then these shoot up.
Conrad, can I ask you something?
Yes.
Pseudopanax crassifolius, which is the one with just the single long leaves.
Yeah.
When it gets to a certain age, you're absolutely right. It gets to about 10, 12 feet. It puts out its adult leaves.
Yeah.
They're dull. They're boring.
Yeah.
Little white flowers. I've got two of them. Now, I'd just like to know whether you've ever had any experience of anybody cutting them back to see whether they will reshoot.
That is what I've been waiting for. So mine, the one that I have, I grew it in the previous garden, and they move really easily as well, I find. So I grew it in the previous garden and I moved it here, and it's not, I think it's about maybe 12 foot tall, and it must be about 8, 9 years old. So it probably won't be that long until it turns into adult foliage, but that's what I'm waiting for. To see if it's still back to, maybe a foot high.
Yeah.
If it revert to the juvenile form again. I think it might, but only time will tell, and I'll definitely try it, and if it works, I'll let you know.
You've convinced me, I think, because I think I'm going to try it anyway, because I have to face the fact that every time I look at them, I think, I'm a bit disappointed with you. You were like most people, you were prettier when you were younger. So I think I'll do it anyway, and I'll let you know, eh?
Fair enough. It's grown up to be a disappointment, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it should work, because I think there's a lot of plants, when you cut them back, if they're ones that, if the likes of eucalyptus as well, if they've mature leaves, if you cut them right back to ground level, they often revert back to the juvenile form for a few years, and they do cut back quite well, because that one normally they grow as a single stem. But where I had it, I wanted a wee bit more foliage, so I had cut it back, and I think it has 4 different stems now. So they do re-sprout from older wood lower down, but definitely worth experimenting with.
Yeah.
And if it's, it's at the stage where you're not liking it, where you don't like it anyway, you're probably going to cut it down and take it out anyway. So it's definitely worth, pulling it or, experimenting with this.
Woohoo! T-Rex.
I know you grow this in your garden because I was in your garden maybe about 5 years ago in the exotic. I think it's an exotic garden. I think you grow it from memory.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic plant. Thordis, you probably don't have this in your garden.
No, believe me, I want it.
So, Tetrapanax, papyrifer, rex. Now, some people, there's like a coating in the back, and some people...
It's called indumentum.
Yeah, indumentum, that's the word. And some people, if they breathe that in, it can really go for their lungs. But I don't seem to have any issues with that, so you need to be careful. But it's... This isn't the biggest leaf. I actually took this one off because it was bashing into the tree ferns beside it. Like, they can get even bigger than this. It's just, like, to be able to grow a tree... Well, it is ultimately a small tree, in our conditions, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's completely hardy. Like, if it gets knocked back in a really hard winter, 9 times out of 10, it's going to re-sprout from below ground level. That's the only thing with it, but it can be a wee bit invasive. It will send up suckers. Does yours sucker much, Alan?
Yeah, it does. And I think partly it's caused by people digging around underneath them and disturbing the roots, and that kind of thing. But when I used to propagate that before, when I had a small plant centre, just plants left over in the garden, the way I propagated that was to dig the roots up and slice the roots into lengths of about 1 foot, 2 foot long, curl them around in a pot, plant them, new plants. Yeah.
I've heard people doing that as well. Mine throws up normally a couple of suckers a year, and I just chop them and dig them up and give them away, for them. But if you're wanting to do in larger quantities, if you have an nursery. Now, I just said that I don't react to that.
I just noticed
that. So just ignore what I said earlier.
Don't have like a bad back and bad lungs. That's too much.
As well. I'm going to need inhalers.
Now, obviously, you're growing that, and you're growing all of these things in a small garden. Now, I admittedly have to find room for the other half and the dog. But clearly, you are proof that you don't have to have Alan's 32 acres to be able to enjoy all of these plants. A little bit like Mike Clifford, lots of the people we talk to, you managed to enjoy all these plants in a small space.
Yeah, big plants in a small space. That's what they always say, because, especially if you're new to gardening, you kind of think, I have to put, I have a small garden, a small suburban garden, and then you have a wee border around the side and it's 1 foot wide and you put little tiny plants in it. But to really have impact on the garden, I'm going to start choking now. to have impact in the garden, big plants actually extend the garden because they grow upwards and they grow outwards. and they just extend the level of interest that you have, and they make a small space look bigger because you can't see it all at once. If you have a small garden and then you're just surrounded by 3 fences on 3 sides and then the house on the 4th, you feel quite enclosed. You know, it's quite boxy, whereas when it's all full of foliage and flowers, it does definitely feel much bigger.
That remark that Conrad just made about using bigger plants and things is absolutely right. It does extend. And when you go up, you do what Beth Chatto once said to me many years ago, you paint the sky. Because we don't think that, you know, we forget that there are plants that grow tall, and those plants that grow tall, they have the extra dimension. And they just increase, providing they're not all on top of you, but they increase the size of your garden. And the interest and all the rest of it. It's just fantastic. To anybody that's listening and they've got a small garden, don't forget to paint the sky.
Yeah. Add layers. You know, think of a forest. Yeah. You're not going to create a forest in your garden, but think of the way plants grow in the forest. You know, you've your ground cover level, and then you've your perennials and your shrubs, and then your trees, and adding all those different layers of interest and different heights, it just increases the amount of interest exponentially in the garden.
And you said that you're big into exotics, but you do like your kind of normal plants in inverted commas as well. So you're kind of exploiting all those different layers, I suppose, to be able to get as many different plants in as possible, because obviously you're a plantaholic.
Because I'm greedy. Yeah, I want to grow all the plants, like everything that I see, you know, I want to grow. And there's a garden nearby, an old wall garden, and they've actually given me a corner of their garden. So then all my overspill plants are now been planted in there as well, because I don't have enough space here for the plants. There's plants that I love and I don't want to get rid of, but I don't feel I have space in this garden to grow them, and I want to try new things. So then things that I want to keep, but don't want to, so I've started planting them over there as well. And then I also use that as a trial ground as well for new plants. So some things like lilies and things like that, and dahlia seedlings, I'll grow them on there for a year and sort of assess them and pick out then the ones that I like and the ones that are doing, you know, have really good colors or shapes. And then I'll move them into this garden. So it's kind of backwards and forwards between the two.
Conrad, do you save your own seed from the dahlias that you have?
I started to. I used to only grow big double dahlias, and then in the last couple of years, I've moved over to singles. I grow a couple of doubles left, and some of the anemone flowered ones as well. But I'm definitely moving towards the single dahlias, and then I'm going to save, you know, all the really good colors. I'm going to start saving them. But then it's having the space then to grow them all out. Yeah. Because you know how many dahlia seeds do you get from one head of, you know, seeds?
Well, you get 50 plants at least.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got 50 plants. You've got to line them out. You've got to have the space to grow them on. Then you've got to assess them to see not just the colours, but how they grow. I mean, what the habit is, tall, short, medium, whatever. And I do it every year. But I mean, I have to say, I do cut the numbers down to I probably trial maybe 15 or 20 a year. That's all. Yeah. It's too much otherwise. I tend to grow those in pots and we'll just see how they go. We've got some interesting colours and shapes, though.
Yeah, I know Jimmy Blake down in Jimmy and his wife June, or his sister June down in Wicklow. They do the same. They grow loads of single dahlias and then save their seeds each year and grow them on. And both of them have had some fantastic ones. Yeah. That they've produced.
And it's well worth trying, because I think when people buy a dahlia tuber, they think they grow it from seed. It's going to be like growing Tulipa sprengeri from seed or something. That's a really long process. But it's amazing what a dahlia seed produces in its first year.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah, very exciting. I need to do more of that. Have you any other show and tell, Conrad?
I do. So that was kind of some of the foliage that I have. And then I mentioned colour. So I have a few Crocosmias. Now, these are actually growing in the walled garden. I don't have these in my own garden. I do have other Crocosmias, but they're not just in flower at the minute. So this one is Hellfire.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a really nice one. It's really deep red. It's a bit like Lucifer, but I think it's nicer because Lucifer has a bit of orange in it, and I've kind of gone off it. It's still a good plant, but I've just kind of gone off it when I've seen Hellfire because it's a really deep, velvety, dark red, and produces a good amount of flowers as well, because there in that stem you can see there's 3 sets coming. And then the other one that I have is I'm going to name drop here. This one came from Helen Dillon down in Dublin. A few of us were visiting her garden. It was actually the year she was moving to her new house, and I think we were there in August, and she was moving a couple of weeks later, and it was myself and some gardening friends, and we saw this Crocosmia down the back and pointed it out, and then there she was. She's always very generous. She was there. She arrived with the spade, and then we all dug up clumps of it and took them home with us. And again, it's really large, really orange flowers, really good heads of them, and they sit really well. They just sit at that angle and then arch forward. Now, I am watching it because Crocosmias can be a bit invasive, and this one seems to be staying in a clump, whereas I have noticed a couple of bulbs moving out, about 6 inches, 8 inches away from the base of the plant. So this one may be a wee bit more rampant, but it's just the colour of that is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that's a real stunner. And I know, I think we've got a viewer in Ireland called David, who the last time we mentioned Crocosmias was very excited, was like, shout out the Crocosmias. So this is like another installment for you. They are wonderful plants. I mean, I actually quite like the normal bog standard Montbretia, really. I mean, they're just lovely.
Like you see it here in Ireland, and the hedgerows, you have miles of fuchsia, and then underneath, so miles of fuchsia from South America, and then the ordinary Montbretia, the bright orange one, then growing underneath it. Completely clash, but they just look fantastic together at this time of year.
Oh, Conrad, I got a challenge for you. Well, Crocosmias, I mean, it's quite interesting what you can get from seed from them. I don't know, you probably know this, but some of the foremost breeders of Crocosmias earlier in this century came from Norfolk, where I live. And I think it's quite interesting to actually, do a couple of crosses and see what happens, especially something to try and get larger flowers.
I'm going to try that because I have a couple of ones that I got from Cali Gardens over in Scotland. Yeah. And one of them is, I think it's Cali Sword. Yeah. And at the minute, it's about 5 foot tall. It's up. I am 5'9.5". And
half very important.
It's very important. Yeah, half an inch makes all the difference. So I think it's up about the foliage is pulled upright and it's up about my shoulder height. But I see flower buds just starting to form at the minute. But the flowers themselves, they're not overly exciting on it. No. They're kind of like brownish, a brownish orange. But if you could cross the likes of that or that with, and get I like really big plants now. Obviously, we're talking about big plants in small gardens, but some, these might be overpowering in a small garden. But if I get a 5 foot high plant with flowers like that or that on it, would be amazing. So yeah, I'm gonna take up your challenge and try that.
Good.
Nice. What else have we got? Oh, hedychiums, ginger lilies. I've grown loads of them over the years, and in our climate, well, it's the same throughout the British Isles, really. That a lot of the the American hybrids and the really fancy flowered ones, I find they don't flower because our summers aren't really long enough and they're not hot enough, and our springs are kind of start-stop the whole time. So it takes them, ages to really get going. But there are some that are hardy and will flower and are really, really tough plants. Now this one, it's not the most exciting one. There are ones with bigger flowers, but this one is Untitled. It was collected by Roy Lancaster, this form here. And I think it's one of the hardiest ginger lilies that you can grow. I'm trying to remember where it was in Yunnan, on Kunming in Yunnan, that Roy Lancaster collected that. I can't remember if it was in the 70s or the 80s. And it's quite a short growing one. For me, it only is about maybe 2 foot tall at most, 1.5 foot tall. And normally it would be in flower in July, but this year we've had a really slow spring, so it's a bit later this year. But I grow also Hedychium densiflorum Stephen and Sarung, and again they're really good, dependable flowers. There's Tara and another one. Oh, so you get Hedychium spicatum, which it's okay, but I don't think it's the most exciting one. But then there's one that has the P. Bon on the end of it. So Hedychium spicatum P. Bon. It's quite hard to track down, but it was collected by Paul Bonavia. I think it was in the Burma Nepal border, and the flowers on it, they're similar to Unanense, but they're just a bit bigger and they're more colourful. So they are sort of an ivory, and then there's orange and creams and yellows, and then it produces, like a lot of legumes do, the ones that flower, the seed heads in the autumn. So you've got the yellow or the red seeds in the on a yellow background, and it's a really dependable one, a really good one to track down if you can get a hold of it. And I've also got this year Devon Cream, which is one of the larger flowered ones. I think it's a cross between Gardnerianum and Coronarium. Can't remember the name of the one.
Coronarium, yeah.
That's it, yeah. So I think it's a cross between those two.
Right.
So, and it's supposed to be dependable in terms of flowering earlier in the year too. So I'm hoping they'll get early flowers on that. Because they die back to ground level, and maybe with the mulch as well in colder areas, a lot of them are very hardy, but just they may not flower before the frost come because they need quite a long growing season. But I think here, because we get so much rain, it kind of reminds them of their Himalayan homelands. They're not homesick here, so they do quite well.
I just going to say to you, what is your annual rainfall? Because our annual rainfall here is 20 inches a year, which is almost like desert conditions.
Yeah, you're quite dry there. So remember walking through your desert garden and seeing some plants you can grow through the desert wash, but we couldn't get away with them here. I think it's over a metre. So I think it might be about 1.2. We have a weather station about 3 miles up the road. It's up on a hill, so they would have slightly higher rainfall up there. But we get plenty of rainfall. Now, if you move further down the east coast of Northern Ireland into County Down, out the Ards Peninsula, where Mount Stewart is, they would have much higher sunlight levels and much less rainfall. But up here, we're kind of the edge of the Antrim Plateau, so we get a lot of rain, that falls, and then it just dumps on us.
I remember Mount Stewart as the first garden I ever saw, Beschneria yuccioides. I don't know. Do you know it? Yeah, you do.
I do, yeah. I grow it, yeah.
And it was growing at the foot of their loggia, and I thought, well, I'll never be able to grow that in England. But I went to visit an old gentleman down the road, and there he had it growing in his garden, smack bang against the south-facing wall of his house. And I said, oh, you've got Beschneria. He said, you're the only one that ever knows what it is. Nobody knows what it is. And so I told him about Mount Stewart and everything. And he said, well, do you want a bit? So he dug his plant up, split it in half, and gave me half. I've had it ever since. Amazing.
Yeah, it's really tough now. I find in a cold year, or if sometimes hail shower can kind of damage the leaves a wee bit, but it's, I've never lost it, even in those really cold winters. And as you say, you take a clump off, or you take a chunk off the clump and just stick it in the ground, and it seems to rock it out. And the flower spike, mine flowered last year. It's well, it's a bit of a rude looking thing, it's this big enormous pink thing that erupts out of the centre. Over a few weeks it expands out. It grows about 6-7 foot long, and then the flowers themselves, they're about an inch long, and then they're pink, and then they go to green at the tips.
That's right.
Amazing plant, and amazing again. I'm always really amazed that we can grow these things here. I've got a couple of variegated ones that I got recently. Flamingo Glow. I don't know if you grow it. So it's a yellow stripe. Yeah, down there.
Yeah, one in a pot, but I don't. I mean, it's in the greenhouse. I daren't pull it out. I think maybe it's not hardy. I don't know.
Yeah, with the variegation may not be. And then I picked up one as well from Cultural Garden Flowers called Bob Brown. So it's got, rather than the yellow stripe to the center of the leaf, this one's much more subtle. It's got sort of a creamy ivory, just edge the leaf as well. So hopefully I'm going to try them outdoors. I've got 3 Flamingo Glows, so I'm going to experiment with growing one on the ground.
You can try one outside and see what happens.
Yeah.
And let Alan know. I mean, it's a really valuable job you're doing, particularly, with your wind and your rainfall. You're trialing all these plants so that other people know. It's great.
Yeah. And then I was going to say in the patio as well, we have the back of the house is south facing, so we have now I've got a couple of 3 small beds that I've got at the base of the wall. So now I have a south facing, wall, the planting bed at the base. So I'm going to try plants that are a wee bit more tender or need a sort of slightly drier conditions as well. I got a couple of palm trees, Chamaerops humilis vulcano, which is like a slightly smaller growing version of Chamaerops humilis. So I'm going to plant them either side of the back door. Now, eventually, maybe in about 100 years, it'll be too big for that position, but I won't need to worry about that. And then I'm experimenting with different agaves as well, because a lot of the ones that even they say can take rainfall just don't really do well here. You know, the combination of rain and cold, but I'm looking forward to experimenting with that new planting position. As I say, that's just where I was saying earlier about how every square inch of garden really counts. So this is and I can grow climbers up the house now as well, that I've got access to soil underneath. So I'm looking forward to having fun with that. Now, more colour. So these are, now I'm gonna say I don't like these because there's a few things. This is Lilium rubina, R-O-B-I-N-A, and it's one of, they call them tree lilies. They're basically, I don't like that name either because lilies aren't trees, but they are hybrids between the trumpet lilies and the Oriental lilies. And Oriental lilies need to have acidic ground. Trumpet lilies can grow in either, but these hybrids are really tough and they can grow in all sorts of conditions. But the problem that I have with them is because my soil is so rich, they grow about 8 foot tall and the flowers are facing up the way, and I am 5'9.5", you might remember. So I'm looking up at these things and they're way up there. So that's the view that I'm getting of them in my garden. So and they're also like, yeah, they're a bit over the top, really, aren't they?
Yes.
They just don't fit in, do they?
No.
So I'm going much more refined now. Well, I have another one, and I don't mind this one as much. Now, this one is Terrasol, but it's still a bit much, even among the exotic plants. And again, the flowers kind of sit at that angle. So what I've been doing is searching out the new lily hybrids that are of that parentage, but have either outward facing or downward facing blooms, and they're not as large. So Rubina has a bloom like that, but this one, I'll just knock the petal off it, but this one is Mr. Pistachio, and it's much nicer. Its scent isn't as overpowering as well. It's quite a nice light scent, whereas that one, you would need a really big house, like a really big hall or something, to put them in if you were cutting them for the house. But these ones here, they sit at that angle.
Yeah.
And they're just so much easier to incorporate into the garden.
Grace, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the color is really nice. You have the sort of yellow center, and then it fades to sort of ivory at the tips. And then another one, now this one is a bit bigger, but it's Easter Morn. But again, it kind of sits at that angle. It's kind of pink flushed in the rear, and then it's yellow in the center. It's almost a bit like Lilium regali, but it's just a bit more punch to it.
Yeah.
But again, a nice scent. And then now Lilium nepalense can be sort of a tougher thing to grow because it likes to be drier in the winter. So they have hybridized Lilium nepalense with some of the Oriental lilies, and they've come up with, there's a few different ones about. This one is called Yin. So there's Yin and Yang, and there's Kushimaya, and there's another one as well I can't remember the name of. So these still need to have acidic conditions, but it's a much tougher growing plant. It has much more vigor, but it still has Lilium nepalense. The flowers tend to hang at that angle, whereas this one, they sit out a bit there. But it's a really nice light scent, a slightly lemony scent, mixed with an Oriental lily scent. But again, really, really tough.
Conrad, all this talk about lilies, I'm going to have to ask, do you have the lily beetle?
Don't mention that word. No, we don't have them here yet. I know that they are in the south. I know they're around Dublin, and I know they're marching their way north, and they've got as far as Antrim town, which is about 40 to 50 miles south of here. And that's as far as I know, as far as I've heard that they've got. I know they're on their way. They're marching north steadily.
Yeah.
Is it some spring or some year they're going to arrive? So I'm making the most of it while I can. But as yet, I can still get away with my lilies without having to pick them off. They're vile, so they are. The way the grubs, they cover themselves in their own excrement, and they're just
disgusting.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that you have them in your gardens over there.
Yeah, we do. And I mean, I'm just sort of thinking that I've got a couple of clumps of something like your Rosita there, and my front courtyard, which is just outside the window here. And the bottom third of all the foliage is just ripped to pieces.
Yeah.
And I thank God I had gloves on the other day. I just got my hand around the stem and I went up like that. And well, I crushed a few grubs, I guess.
Yeah, you can't be too squeamish. No, as I say, they are marching steadily north, but their legions haven't reached the north coast just yet.
It's amazing, these pests. I was in my kitchen the other day and I looked up and there's a beautiful moth on the window. And I could see the inside of it, so I didn't know what it was. Went outside and looked it up. Box tree moth.
Oh no.
Oh, that looks so beautiful. What is it? Oh, of course it's the box tree moth. And it's found my box. So
oh no. And they're really they decimate box, don't they? Like I box it here, but as yet, I don't think we've any blight. There was one wee bit that I thought maybe had box blight, but I'm not really sure yet. I'm keeping an eye on it. But there's box tree, there's the moth, and then there's blight. And is there something else attacks them as well?
They're not having a good time. No. I don't know how much longer my box is going to be in the world, but I better start really enjoying it.
And then I noticed actually, was it last year or the year before? So they look like wee tiny shrimps, almost like wee crustaceans. And I think they're from either Australia or New Zealand. I don't know how they get. We have New Zealand flatworm here as well. You see the odd one each year. But these wee guys, they live under pots, and like if there's piles of leaves, you'll find, you can find 30, 40, 50 of them. And then if you move things, they sort of hop about, they sort of flick. But apparently they don't actually do any great deal of harm. I cannot remember the name of them right now, but again, it's all these different pests and diseases that are just coming in. It is an issue.
You need to set up some sort of, I don't know, some armed guard at your garden gate to keep the lily beetle out with all of those lilies.
Yeah. They're going to have a field day when they arrive here. All-you-can-eat banquet. So
I thought there was one more lily left.
There is. So this is an Asiatic lily. This one is called Pink Giant, and it is not a giant. It grows about so far it's about 6 foot tall, taller than me. But they start out, they've almost an almost peachy shade to the pink, and then as they age, there's a slight grayness to them almost. I'm not sure how well that's picking up, but
it's fine.
Really nice and really easy one as well, and it'll grow in alkaline conditions. So for people that can't grow some of the, the Oriental lilies that need the acidic conditions, these are really good and really tough and easy, so long as you don't have too many lily beetles to deal with. But I've heard the lily beetles, they strip the foliage, but do they really? Do they knock the lilies back for the following year, or do the lilies still come back with as much vigor?
They have had no adverse effect on the growth of the lilies. I mean, the lilies that went in 2 years ago, I mean, they probably reached meter two. They're nearly up to 2 meters this year.
Yeah.
Rainfall affects the growth of lilies, I find too, because I mean, when, in being dry, you notice that they kind of stop and they don't get taller.
I have no experience with that at all.
Well, this year we've had quite a lot of rain for us anyway, and that suits them very well. And the other thing that I've grown actually, which I didn't think would grow for me, but I bought 5 culms of Lily moratum, the golden-rayed lily of Japan. I saw it growing at Blickling Hall, which is in stately home in Norfolk, in their woodland area, and thought, well, I'll just try a few. And to my amazement, I've got 2 that have actually done better than they did last year.
Yeah.
So hopefully, who knows?
It's a beautiful one. I've never grown it, but I've seen pictures of it. It's really nice one.
Yeah, and a good smell too.
Yeah, which is really important because that's the thing with most of the Asiatics. The majority of them aren't scented as well, so that's kind of a disappointment with some of them. But
yeah.
So at this point, I feel like I want to rip half the plants out of my garden and just replace them with half the things you've spoken about. I am having a huge amount of FLOMO. Which actually, I mean, this idea, this thing we do on the podcast where we talk about the plants that we've seen that we want to grow, our floral or plant-based fear of missing out. I mean, with a small garden, you must have quite a lot of this, Conrad, because clearly you are obsessed with plants. You're always following new introductions, you're looking at catalogues, you're looking at plant listings, and you obviously only have your garden and this bit of walled garden to work with.
Yeah. I grow plants for a few years, and then some of them might get moved to the walled garden, or some might be given away. But I'm quite ruthless as well. So if a bit like Alan's Pseudopanax, after a few years, if a plant isn't doing it for me, it's gone. And I'm not overly sentimental about them either. You know, if plant isn't working, rip it out, cut it down. You know, I'm not sentimental about gardens at all. It's an opportunity to try something new. But like I mentioned, quite a few of the Scheffleras, and my FLOMO is Schefflera microphylla. I have to admit, I have grown this in the past and lost it over winter, but I've been speaking to a few people that are growing it and they've managed to get away with it in conditions similar to mine. So I want to try it again. It's just a matter of getting hold of it. It tends to be quite expensive and hard to get. So I want to make sure that I take care of it and that it's not going to keel over again after the first winter. But so the Scheffleras I had shown earlier. So these have, they're quite big leaves, but Schefflera microphylla, the leaves on it could be 18 inches. Each of the leaflets could be 18 inches long, and they could be 4 or 5 inches wide. And then the underside of them is covered in, again, orangey ginger indumentum. And it's ultimately a tree, but it's tender enough. But I know of somebody growing it inland in County Galway that manages to get away with it. So if he can grow it, I can as well. So that's
Does he grow it under trees, Conrad?
No, he doesn't. It's a new garden. It's similar to mine, and it's it's open. He lives in a housing development. There aren't really trees around him at the minute. It's not above the height of the fence, as far as I know. It's maybe getting to that point, so it'll catch a wee bit of wind when it gets a bit taller. But no, there's no shelter at all, because that's what I thought. Growing it under an evergreen tree would be the place to grow it, but he can get away with it.
Whoa!
Completely exposed. But then, Ireland's a very different climate, and microclimates, of course, as well.
Microclimates in your own garden, because you have two plants, one planted 10 foot away from the other. One grows well and the other doesn't.
Yeah.
Explain.
And there is another plant that it's a canna, but I haven't managed to actually track down the species name of it. And I don't know if anybody grows it or if it's even been properly introduced into cultivation. But apparently it's a scented canna that grows quite large. So if you imagine Canna Emani, I think it's something similar to that, but it has creamy flowers. From memory, this is, but the flowers apparently smell like freesia or lily. So if you can imagine a scented canna, and a bit like the Crocosmia there that Alan was talking about, trying to cross some different types, what I would love to do is get a hold of that that canna that has scented flowers, and then try and cross it with some of the colourful ones, to get a range. Can you imagine a range of cannas that had really bright coloured flowers or purple foliage, and then a scent as well on top of that?
Fantastic.
Yeah, but I have to track down the species name, and then, I don't know, make a trip to South America or Central America and try and find it.
Could be a dangerous place to go, Conrad.
Yeah, could be.
Quite the undertaking. It's interesting that coming into this podcast, and I obviously knew that we talk a lot about exotics when we were talking to you, Conrad, but I just happened, as I was spending my hours sort of scrolling past lots of plant porn on Instagram, I went past an amazing photo from Jurassic Jungle _ I think, if you're going to look up photos from their garden. And I've heard of and I've seen pictures of Manahot grahamii before, but they the photos and taking it against the sky and just all these different angles, I feel like I might have to explore more exotics, even if it's not Manihot grahamii. I think this is a whole new chapter in my garden. I don't know how I'm going to fit everything in, but I'm going to try.
Well, this is kind of my aim. I try to introduce, I do plant talks as well to plant clubs. So I try to introduce people to things that are a bit different. You don't have to have a whole exotic garden like I have, but, trying something a wee bit different. And yeah, you might get a bad winter in 4 years' time or 5 years' time, and you might lose it. But, for the pleasure that it's given you over that period, definitely, it's worth trying something a wee bit different.
Yeah. And Conrad, I'll add to that. If you buy a bunch of flowers, they'll be dead in a week.
Yeah. And I could go into, I could sell these.
Yeah.
Fantastic things. But yeah, so, you buy a bunch of them for 15 or 20 quid. And as you say, it's gone in a week. Whereas you could buy a plant for the same price and have, you could have 5 years out of it, or, you could have 20 years out of it. Yeah.
So. Wonderful. Well, Alan, what's your FLOMO this week?
Well, my FLOMO is going to have more of something that I've already got, because
you got space.
I went over yesterday to look at our national collection. Yes, we have a national collection of colchicums. I was just checking on them, actually, because we grow them in water lily baskets so that we make sure that each variety stays true to where it's supposed to be. Underneath, there's a grove of eucalyptus behind them, and underneath the eucalyptus, there's a plant called Bupleurum fruticosum, which is something that Val Bourne has mentioned on a recent podcast. And it's something that I've had for a very long time. And I suddenly looked at it and I thought, I need more of you because you're quite exciting. And the reason it's exciting is if you've got the space to use it as a background plant. Do you know it, Conrad?
No, no. What does it look like? What's it?
Well, it's a shrub. It has slightly glaucous leaves, but these brilliant heads of lime green umbellifer flowers. Not huge, but I mean, it's the kind of plant that looks as if it should be in the background, but somehow or other, when you see it, it will speak to you. It'll just say, "Look at me."
Yeah.
I'm not loud. I'm not colourful. I'm not like a lily. There's more than 5'9.5" tall.
And also great for pollinators.
It is, yeah. It's a great thing for pollinators. It's also great for picking as well, if you want something to mix in with other things. But I just sort of thought, that I ought to consider putting this Bupleurum fruticosum in a few other places in the garden. I mean, I'm trying to sort of improve my garden the whole time. So each area that I go into and I work on, I think if there's a common plant there, it's got to be a common plant for the right reason, i.e. it's a good plant, it's worth growing. Otherwise, I want to grow something either more exotic or slightly different or better than. And I think that possibly Bupleurum fruticosum deserves its place because it's an ideal plant for growing other plants through and with. Clematis, for instance, if you get some interesting, and I don't like those huge flowered clematis either very much, but give me some of the species ones or the Viticella hybrids. There's an awful lot of breeding being done with them recently. And I just think, whoa, that's something that could be really interesting because Bupleurum is now flowering July, August, September. Lots of the clematis that coincides with their season. That's my thinking. That's my FLOMO.
Yeah. I think it's funny sometimes how, there can be plants that you've grown for years or that you've seen about, and just suddenly it's like a light bulb moment with you, and just it clicks and you think, yeah, you're a really good plant. Yeah, I need to have you in my garden. Or
yeah.
I've certainly got food for thought now, Conrad. It has been a joyful hour of planty chat.
Well, thank you very much. It's been enjoyable.
Great to meet you, Conrad. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, it's so interesting. You get a fresh take on things. And I mean, you've reawakened my love of Scheffleras, if you like. Schefflera rhododendrifolia we grow here, and it grows in the open. It's fine, and it grows really, really well. Taiwaniana I lost. I don't know why.
Okay, yeah.
Could be just neglect or in the wrong place. But that large leaf form that has yet to be named that's on my radar, I have to say.
Join the queue.
Well, thank you for inspiring us, and happy gardening, Conrad.
Thank you very much. Good to chat.
I like your funky lamp.
Oh yeah, that's cool. That was a really expensive B&Q find. Oh, there's somebody just at the front door. So they just rang the doorbell.
Can't even imagine what your floor looks like. There must be plants everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
What the hell are they called? You have to edit this.
Oh, are the bulb, the
Nauticum!
Let's retake that.
I went over yesterday to look at our national collection. Yes, we have a national collection of something I can't remember. The Colchicums.